Hello and welcome to the Faces of Africa Pocket Edition, where we dissect and discuss the topics covered in our weekly documentary show, which takes you through the continent's history, cultures, and major issues through exploring great personalities. This week on Faces of Africa podcast, we talk about the South Africa elections. I am Fathiya Nur and I am joined by Hannah Viviers. She is a CGTN presenter and a seasoned journalist from South Africa. Great to have you with us, Hannah.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me.
Key faces or leaders that we are seeing in this year's elections. Of course, the current president, incumbent President Cyril Ramaphosa, who is the ANC leader, is also in the race. Who else have you seen that you'd want us to know about?
What's really interesting about South African politics is that in some cases, faces matter, and then in some cases they don't. So here's what I mean by that. For instance, the ANC in itself is almost like an institution in South Africa. So you'll have people, and I've got friends, and I know people where they'll be like, it doesn't matter. They will vote the ANC. So, one of the, again, I come back to some of the reports that we've done at CGTN, and there was this woman, and she said, one of the sound bites in the story, she said, we will, for the next 100 years, we will vote for the ANC, right? So in that sense, it doesn't matter who's in power in the ANC. And then on the other hand, you'll get personalities, right? 100%. So you'll get somebody like Julius Malema, who came, I mean, he was very loud when he was ANC Youth League leader, very, very influential, had a very strong following. But it's him as a personality, I think, and what he stands for and what he's been advocating for the longest time. So in that sense, you do see a face mattering. If you go to the DA, which is the main opposition party at the moment, people who see the DA still as they might think of it as, well, what are your interests? Do you still have maybe white interests that might be behind the DA, and people might be scared of that? So it doesn't, I mean, there was a time when Mmusi Maimane was a black man, was the leader of the DA. And even then, you still had people who had distrust for the DA, even under a black leader, still saying, we still don't trust what the DA is doing. And so South African politics is really interesting in the fact that in some cases, faces matter, and in some cases, it's the institution that people are voting for.
Even here in Kenya particularly, people would see, let's say, Raila Odinga, they'd go for the face. They wouldn't think much about the party, and it's just the face. It's Raila, it's Ruto. I think it's something also in the continent. But now that we're talking about faces, this week on the episode of the documentary that we're airing, we're featuring Nelson Mandela, famously known as Madiba. If today he was to look at what's happening in South Africa, what do you think he'd think of the country?
One of my very first jobs in journalism was at a newspaper. Nelson Mandela visited the newspaper, and he knew that the majority of people that worked at the paper were Afrikaans. And when he came in, he spoke Afrikaans to those people. This is a language that to this day, there are a lot of South Africans who call Afrikaans the language of the oppressor. And yet he goes in, and he was put in prison by a predominantly Afrikaans government, but he went in there and he spoke to these people in Afrikaans. And to me, that is just like who he was, where he loved South Africa and he loved the people of South Africa. For him, what he wanted was for all of us in South Africa to win.
My message to those of you involved in this battle of brother against brother is this: take your guns, your knives, and your pangas and throw them into the sea.
When you watch the documentary, despite everything that South Africans went through, even him, 27 years in prison, that's a long time. But he chose to forgive and try to move on and make the country prosper. Do you think a lot of South Africans have taken that? What are your thoughts?
I was speaking to one of my doctors, and he had been in Canada for many, many years. And I say to him, why did you come back? It's the first question we'll ask. You know, people are wanting to go to Canada. Why did you come back? And he said to me, I was so lonely. And one of the things that is so beautiful in South Africa is that there is a beautiful sense of community where if you are there, I dare to say that it's on a very rare occasion, if you're plugged into a community, that you'll starve. I went to South Africa when I was 10 years old, so I'm an immigrant. We were an immigrant family, and I remember a young man taking us into his home, and he had a bedroom, and he put us up in that room, and we were plugged into a church community, and that community made sure that every single evening we had food. And I saw during COVID, people get together, and they would give food to people who had lost their jobs, and you would see queues and queues of people. And that for me is like the spirit of South Africa. I know that somebody might be saying, hey, but there's a lot of xenophobia in South Africa, and you can experience that. There's a lot of racism, you can experience that. And you know what? When you talk about that forgiveness, if there wasn't forgiveness on the part of the majority of South Africans, you wouldn't be able to go into a country and see anybody who wasn't black, right? What I come away from it, and having lived outside of the country for a while now, is when I think of South Africa, I don't think of hate, and I don't think of unforgiveness or anger. I think of a nation of people who will look after you and who look after each other, and to me that's just so remarkable. That's what I don't lose sight of. It's just that beautiful community spirit in South Africa.
We enter into a covenant that we shall build a society in which all South Africans, both black and white, will be able to walk tall without any fear in their hearts, assured of their inalienable right to human dignity, a rainbow nation at peace with itself and the world.
I think I have learned so much from you, especially your personal experiences. I personally haven't been to South Africa. I hope I'll visit it. Thank you for making time for us and coming on the podcast. We appreciate that. Remember, you can watch this week's documentary, that is Finding Mandela, on our CGTN platforms on Sunday at 9:30 GMT, 12:30 East Africa time, 17:30 Beijing time, and it will be uploaded on our social media platforms on Monday. See you next time.